Hello everyone. Today I want to be talking about a recent recording of Ted Cruz that has been leaked of him complaining about the Trump tariffs and calling JD Vance a pawn of a broader conservative movement, really Tucker Carlson, and how Ted Cruz was talking to some donors recently and how he's possibly setting up a 2028 election run and what I believe a 2028 election would look like as Ted Cruz with the nominee of the Republican Party. Now let's read the article. Ted Cruz, the Texas Republican, eyeing the White House in 2028, torch JD Vance, and ridicule President Trump's tariff policies during a private meeting with donors. According to a recording obtained by this article company, the recording, nearly 10 minutes, provided a look at how Cruz is positioning himself as a free trade, pro interventionist Republican ahead of the 2028 primaries. During his talks, Cruz cast Vance as a pawn of a conservative podcaster, Tucker Carlson. Cruz has accused Carlson of promoting anti Semitic and anti Israel foreign policy. The recording Cruz was provided by a Republican source. They were made early and middle 2025. So this isn't recent, this recording that happened recently, but we now know what Cruz is looking, how feels about the Trump presidency, and also this is probably how a lot of Republican senators feel about the Trump presidencies. In later recording, Cruz warns donors that Trump's tariffs could decimate the economy, which, is what someone who supports free trade would feel like. It's personally what I feel like. I'm a pro free trade guy. I agree with Cruz here. And could lead to his impeachment, which is understandable because the president is not allowed to put tariffs on countries without congressional support or without Congress approving it. And the way that Trump has been putting tariffs is illegal. But since Congress isn't doing anything about it, he's not getting in any trouble. So unless the Supreme Court comes out and it's like, hey, Trump, you gotta go get congressional support or the tariffs are illegal. Until that happens, Trump's been willy-nilly with the tariffs. And Trump's also continued to threaten tariffs, even though I do believe Congress would not support the tariffs at all. He tells them that after Trump introduced the tariffs in early April 2025, Cruz and a few other senators had a call with Trump in which they urged him to stand down. Cruz says the lengthy call, which stretched past midnight, did not go well, and Trump was yelling and cursing. As we see here, we see into Trump's mind a little bit too. I mean, he's yelling at other Republicans, other senators who support his presidency because they don't support his crazy tariff policy, which put a 40% tariff on the EU and 20% tariff on the United Kingdom, and I believe it like a 69% tariff on China. Put tariffs on our NATO allies. I'm okay with tariffs on places like China and Russia because they're not our allies, and I definitely do think that we need to make sure that we're not reliant on places like China for so much of our trade. But putting tariffs on NATO allies and, Japan, South Korea, and Australia really confused me personally. And we even saw Japan and South Korea and Australia go and reach out to China and have talks about making a trade deal. Recently, we've seen Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada, reach out to China, and he's currently working on getting a trade deal done with China because of how uncertain Trump has been and how Trump has been looking like he's going to put more tariffs on Canada, which is why Canada needs to start diversifying where their trade partners. Trump was in a bad mood, Cruz tells his donors. I've been in conversations where he was very happy. This was not one of them, which is quite the way to put it. Cruz says he told Trump, Mr. President, if we get to November of 2026, and people's 401ks are down 30% and prices are up 10 to 20% at the supermarket, we're going to go into election day face a bloodbath. You're going to lose the House, you're going to lose the Senate, you're going to spend the next 2 years being impeached every single week. Which honestly, I believe Cruz is right here. I believe if Dems get control of the House and if they get control of the Senate, which is possible, it is possible, unlikely, I do believe. Right now, I think Dems will get around 225-ish seats in the House and around 49 seats in the Senate, and they have a possibility of getting up to 51 at most if Alaska flips and they can possibly get, maybe have a surprise in some other state. But then Trump told Cruz to, you know, and then when a questioner at the donor session mentioned Liberation Day, Trump branding for his tariffs, of course, Cruz joked, "I've told my team if anyone uses those words, they will be terminated on the spot. That's not the language we use." Which, as we see, Cruz is very anti-Liberation Day, so am I, so... I'm sounding like I'm very pro Ted Cruz. I'm not pro Ted Cruz. I'm just a free trade guy. Ted Cruz is a free trade guy. Cruz also told the donors about battling the White House to accept a trade agreement with India. When a donor asked who in the administration is resisting to reaching such accords, Cruz mentioned White House economic advisor Peter Navarro, Vance, and sometimes Trump. Cruz repeatedly brings up Vance and the recording, tying him to Carlson and accusing him of advancing the podcaster's anti-interventionist and foreign policy. Tucker created JD. JD is Tucker's prodigy, and they're one and the same, Cruz says. So as we see here, Ted Cruz believes that JD Vance is just Tucker Carlson, but if he was a politician and not a podcaster. Cruz has been waging a months-long campaign against Carlson on social media, but has been refrained from publicly linking Carlson and Vance, who are friends. At one point in the recording, Cruz alleges that Vance and Carlson pushed for ousting a former National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, because Waltz supported bombing Iran, a position Trump ultimately embraced. Waltz supported being vigorous against Iran and bombing Iran, and Tucker and JD took Mike out, Cruz tells the donors. Vance has said he supported the bombing of Iran's nuclear sites since last June. So, some confusion over here. Who knows what Vance really supports? Who knows what Cruz really supports? Cruz also says Vance and Carlson were behind the appointment of Army veteran Daniel Davis, a sharp critic of U.S. support for Israel, to a top national intelligence position. The senator called Davis a guy who viciously hates Israel and said he helped get Davis quickly removed from the job. What they're saying, a Cruz spokesperson said in a statement that the senator is the president's greatest ally in the Senate and battles every day in the trenches to advance his agenda. Those battles include fights over staffers who try to enter the administration, despite disagreeing with the president and seeking to undermine his foreign policy, the statement said. Senator Ted Cruz is proud of those fights as a bunch of random stuff. So, as we see here, Ted Cruz is trying to position himself away from Trump to possible donors to a 2028 campaign. Now, I do think it is important. No. Ted Cruz had his Senate election in 2024 where he was able to win against Colin Allred. So, in 2028, Ted Cruz will still have 2 years on his Senate term if he doesn't win a 2028 election. So Ted Cruz really has no reason not to run for president in 2028. And I do think Ted Cruz will run for president in 2028. And I do think Ted Cruz could possibly be seen as like a John McCain figure. Am I saying Ted Cruz is as good as a candidate as John McCain was? No. But I do believe Ted Cruz is trying to separate himself from Trump while still being part of that MAGA base. Sorry about the mispronunciation there. So let's go ahead and look like what I believe a Ted Cruz map would look like if he ran for president in 2028. Um, so let's go ahead and get started with all the safe states. Now, Ted Cruz, even though he's a senator from Texas, he won in 2024 by 8.4 points. But even though that's a nice margin, if we go to um, Trump won it by 13.7 points. He underperformed Trump by 4 point no, one two roughly 5 points in the Senate. I mean Senate to presidential level in Texas. And then 2018 he only won Texas by 2.6%, which was extremely close. And in 2012, Ted Cruz won by 15.8 points, which I do believe is the only year he was 2012. And that was the year Mitt Romney won it by 15.8 points. So recently, Ted Cruz hasn't been doing the best in Texas, so I don't think Texas will be safe for Ted Cruz, even though he is a senator from there. Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, I do think are all safe, especially some of these more. Some states I do believe are like Nebraska. I have seen some people think that it will fall out of that safe column because it's held up by a large farming market, which has been affected by the tariffs a lot, which I do agree with. But if Ted Cruz frames himself as a free trade guy and separates himself from Trump, I do believe he will be able to keep that farming base that the GOP has in the Great Plains and places like Missouri and Iowa. Now, Iowa, I don't think it is necessarily safe. Trump won it by only 8 points in 2020 and 9 points in 2016. 2024 was a very good year for Republicans in Iowa, so I don't think Iowa is safe. Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, and South Carolina will all be safe, though. Now we'll go ahead and go over to just a generic Democrat, which I do believe Washington, Oregon, Colorado, Hawaii, Minnesota, New Mexico, Illinois, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey. New Jersey and Virginia will both be safe, even though New Jersey only went to Kamala Harris by 6 points in the 2024 election, and the most recent governor election, New Jersey went dim by, I believe, a little over 10 points. I believe it was 13 points plus Democrat. Delaware, Maryland, and DC will all be safe blue, with Vermont and then this district of Maine and Maine as a whole. We'll now move over to our likely states, which I do believe Texas will be likely. He'll probably win it by around 7 points. I do believe Florida around maybe 9, 8 points. And then we can look at Ohio, which I do believe will be a tougher to win. In 2016, Trump won it by 8 points, but in 2012, Obama won it by 3 points. Ohio definitely is a red state now. So I don't think Cruz would lose it, but I do think it would be closer than more people expect. As if we go to the Senate elections, we did see a Democrat did come within around 4 points of winning it. And as recent as 2018, we've had a Democrat win that seat even after 2016, which was a very good year where Trump was able to win Ohio by a very large margin. So I do believe Ohio will be closer than most people expect. Same with Iowa, I do believe will be within that 5% margin. We can go ahead and say this district of Maine will be Cruz by around 7 points. This district over here will go to the generic Dem candidate by around, I'm not exactly sure, maybe, let's see, probably around 6 points. New Hampshire, I do believe, will possibly be a likely, probably, did have a shift to the right. Honestly, probably goes to the Dem candidate by around 4 points. We're now down to the swing states, where Republicans still hold the majority of registered voters in North Carolina, even though Roy Cooper is polling very well in North Carolina for the 2026 Senate elections. I do believe North Carolina is still going Republican in this scenario. Trump was able to win Arizona by 5.5 points in the 2024 election and 3.5 points in the 2016 election. Biden came very close to losing it. He only won it by 0.31. But on a Senate level, Ruben Gallerio won the Senate election by 2.5 points in 24 and 22, a very good Republican year. Dems still took it by 5 points. And then even in 2020, we had a Dem senator take Arizona. In 2018, we had a Dem senator take Arizona. It's been since 2016. It hasn't been since John McCain was a senator that we've had a uh Democratic had a Republican senator as senator of Arizona, and John McCain is a very good candidate. Um, and then even if we go to the governor's list, we can look. I believe it was in 22 where Democrats won the governor's mansion in Arizona. It's been since 2018 that a governor won. We had a Republican governor in Arizona. So even though on a general level, and Republicans are doing pretty bad with the Hispanic vote recently, and I don't think Ted Cruz will appeal to the Hispanic vote the best. I am going to have to say right now, and with President Trump's approval rating being negative 10%, I am going to have to say Arizona will be very close and go blue. Same with Nevada. I could see Wisconsin possibly going red in this scenario. Um, lot of lot of farmers. I'm not too sure. I do believe Wisconsin is one of those states where it's just tricky, and Biden only took it by, you know, Wisconsin is always a very close state, and if there is a swing state, Ted Cruz will win. I do believe it is probably Wisconsin. If there's another swing state besides North Carolina, Cruz wins. It's probably Wisconsin. I could see Cruz taking Arizona and then losing Wisconsin. But in a 2028 election, I think he either takes Arizona or Wisconsin, but not both. Just because of the amount, you only have so many resources to put into each state. And I think a Ted Cruz 2028 presidency would be a long shot, so I think he would have to take a gamble and could possibly risk losing Arizona, but taking Wisconsin. But I do have the Dem candidate taking Michigan and Pennsylvania. And then with John Ossoff polling in Georgia, I do expect Georgia to also go to the Democrats in this scenario. I'm going to give Ted Cruz a shadow of doubt and say his separation from Trump will maybe be enough for him when Arizona. But Democrats are just doing so good on state level with Arizona. I would be shocked if Ted Cruz is able to keep Arizona under the Republicans' hands. But this is my map. If Ted Cruz runs for president and gets the nominee in the 2028 election. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and peace out.